G'day fellas, welcome to another tier list. If you're watching this live on YouTube right now, head on over to Twitch, because we're live right now. We're probably still doing our Aztec, we're racing to the top 100. We're doing a speed run. We're seeing how fast we can go with Aztec. At the moment, I think we're about rank 400, so probably still going to keep going on that. So come check that out. So we're doing a heavy infantry tier list. We've got everybody in the chat at the moment who is here. We've got H, who is currently rank 2 or rank 3 on the ladder. H should have to let us know. He's going to be providing some expert input, and we're looking at heavy infantry. Now, there's going to be some things that are missing from this heavy infantry list. In particular, you will notice there are no grenadiers. And you might be wondering, Drongo, why are there no grenadiers? It's because even though they've got the heavy infantry tag, they're not really used to counter hand cavalry or heavy cavalry. And ideally, that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at something that's going to be countering heavy cavalry. So we're not including any sort of mercenaries either. So that means like your Swiss pikemen, anything like that, and also not including what is it? We've got the Highlander, the Fusilier, all those sort of mercenaries. Not going to be including those. And so even though with the Japanese, they've got the Yamabushi, which is trainable in the early stages. They've also got I think it's the Yamamoto, the samurai, in the late game. We haven't included him just because he's, in my opinion, not really relevant to the tier list. I don't have enough understanding of how he works, and you really just don't see them a lot in ranked games, especially in 1 versus 1 supremacy, and that's the reason why I'm not gonna include him. So, also, just before we do get into it, keep in mind, it is a tier list. It is subjective. You may look at this and go, that's absolutely wrong, and that's absolutely okay. So I just encourage you to keep an open mind, and we'll talk through this and try and work it out. Keep in mind, I'm also going to be keeping an open mind during this process. We've got a lot of big boys in here. So let's get to it. Where do we start? We start with the end that we're always familiar with. It seems to be the Japanese end of the board, and it is the Ashigaru Musketeer. What more needs to be said? The Ashigaru Musketeer, the base statistics are incredibly high. Now, keep in mind, these bad boys are a little bit expensive, costing 40 coin and 80 food, but they've got the highest movement speed of any musketeer in the game, if I remember correctly. I think that they said at a base of 4.5 movement speed. This can be buffed up even further by one of their wonders that they get. And so as a result, it means that they are S tier just because of that speed. Now, when you start talking about the upgrades that they get, they can stack so many upgrades. You've got the upgrade from the second age upgrade, the third age upgrade. You've got all of the upgrades from your arsenal. You've got the upgrades from, upgrade from the wonder. Then you've got the advanced arsenal upgrades. You've got just a whole bunch of upgrades for them, and that's really what makes them so strong. On top of that, you've also got a daimyo sitting behind them. But it's really the speed that makes them so strong, because they're just able to move over the map, cover distances, escape from skirmishes, and just put out a heap of damage. And for that reason, they're S tier. Now, also in S tier are the Karolian. Now, Karolian definitely do start, we should probably get that off the screen. Karolian do start off quite weak, okay? But when it comes to the mid game, that's when the tables start turning.
Yes. I got something to report to you.
Akarion coming in with a tier 1. Thank you very much, Akarion. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Akarion. I don't know where you're from, but I like the name. I like the way that your name flows. So moving back to the Karolian though. So Karolian starts off weak, but as the game progresses, the Karolian continues to get upgrades and upgrades and upgrades. It's exactly the same as the Ashigaru, but with the Ashigaru, it starts off strong. Karolian starts off weak and then gets very, very strong. By the time you're in the industrial age with a fully upgraded Karolian, I feel sorry for your enemy, because those bad boys, they get to the point now, obviously they can't fight against their counters cost effectively, but they can put up a pretty good fight. They also do have the higher base movement speed. I think it's 4.25 base movement speed. They get advanced arsenal by default, which means that you can up that to 4.68, which is actually faster than an Ashigaru. So really, really amazing unit. Counters cavalry at range instead of at in melee. So one of the problems that you can get is if, let's say, you're playing in the late game against a French player and they start massing up gendarmes, well, now you've got a little bit of an issue, because your Karolians are wonderful at focus firing down a gendarme, but when there's 20 gendarmes that you've now got to worry about, it can be really difficult because they all get on top of you. So you got to try and resort to attack moving it, maybe even having to train a few black riders in behind there. So other musketeers that are in the top tier, so we've got the British musketeer, which is, in my opinion, S tier. So not only is the British musketeer one of the best looking units in the game once it gets upgraded to age 4, it's got a lot of upgrades. It's got 15% attack, 15% HP, both in age 2, 2 separate cards. One of them's a team card as well. And then it's got the Musketeer Combat, which is in age 3. So a further 15% on top of that. On top of that, they also have the Royal Guard upgrade. Musketeers as well are quite an affordable unit, being 75 food and 25 coin. So in my opinion, the British Musketeer in particular is a musketeer that I'm going to be training a lot of. Now keep in mind, one of the reasons why these are also S tier is because typically you're going to be wanting to make a lot of musketeers, even towards the mid game, where typically players are going to be going for skirmishers or dragoons. Instead, people are opting for musketeers just because of longbows. Longbows aren't the strongest unit when it comes to doing their job, and as a result, it means that the British have to fall back on the musketeer, and they can do that because it is S tier. They can use it at range quite effectively as anti-cavalry, and especially start to mass them up. One of the most famous players in the game at the moment, Give You Anxiety, absolutely loves these musketeers, and it's for great reason. It's because they defend his artillery so damn well. They do a great job of it. So, and for that reason, they are in S tier. So now moving on to the next musketeer. So we're going to get all of the musketeers out of the way first, and it is the Sepoy. So the Sepoy goes into A tier. Quite an expensive unit. Not a lot of upgrades on the Sepoy, but you can stack them up. So you've got the British Consulate, you've got the Mansabar, and then there's a couple of cards that you can throw in. But the problem is that the Sepoy falls off late game. It really starts to take a dive around the Industrial Age, because your opponent's skirmishers have got counter infantry rifling. Hazza saying Sepoy are 100% S tier as well. Okay, that's interesting. I'm curious why you think that, Hazza. Is it just because of the early game and the strength that they've got? I guess when you consider, in my considerations, I look at the Ashigaru and I say throughout the entire game, this guy's a beast. The British Musketeer, throughout the entire game, this guy's a beast. The Karolian, in the early game, he's weak source, but by the mid game, he's incredibly strong. He's the best musketeer there is. And then by the late game, he's just, to be quite honest, he's overpowered with the range resist. But the Sepoy, it's kind of the opposite, where he's strong in the early game, but then he starts falling off around Industrial. Attack damage plus fortress scaling is excellent still. Because Sepoy throughout the entire game are best most of the game except for late game. Alright, I'm happy to concede on that one. I'll move the Sepoy up to S tier just because we've got the big H in here, throwing out the facts. And that's very true. So the Sepoy is incredibly dominant throughout the early game, throughout the mid game. It's a really good ratio of food and coin as well. So you're paying, I think it's 90 food, and 30 coin, so they're a little bit more expensive, but a very good ratio, very affordable ratio. So that's why they're up there. They're also quite strong in melee combat. They've got a lot of hit points, and as a result, we can stick them at S tier. Now they do fall off in the late game, but keep in mind the Karolian is quite weak in the early game. So I guess we can say that, you know, what this lacks in the early game, this makes up for it, and vice versa with the late game. And H saying there's a reason why Brit lose to full Sepoy. Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so the next musketeer that we're going to be looking at is the Janissary. Now, I do think the Janissary is an A tier. It'd be very difficult for me to say it would be any higher than that. It's obviously a core component of the Ottoman army, the Ottoman military, but it just really doesn't have enough upgrades. So when you go look at the Ottoman decks, you're going to see one card in there, which is the Janissary Combat. So that's plus 20%. That's a really, really good card, okay? 20% HP, 20% attack, but there's nothing else. The only other thing is this one, which reduces the food and the coin cost. And that's not what you need. At that point in the game, you don't want a reduced cost Janissary. You want an increased attack and an increased damage Janissary. And unfortunately, they are quite strong in the early game. And that is really it. And they, especially towards early fortress, but they begin to fall off. Double racks gens is a strat that exists because it's Janissaries have a very high health pool, and so they can take advantage of it. But I wouldn't be comfortable putting them any higher than this. Maybe even, as H is saying, maybe even B tier potentially for the Musketeers. But just keeping in mind that we do have a lot of units in here, and when we're looking at them, we're going to be considering the Janissary against, say, the Halberdier and the Pikemen, and so we need to make sure that we provide enough space for that. So the next Musketeer, the Iroquois Tomahawk. So I think probably the C tier would be the most reasonable spot for this guy, just because he is going to be up against melee units as well. Unfortunately, he's not the best. His animation is quite weak. He is relatively expensive, costing wood instead of coin, so it's a little bit harder to macro for. I definitely wouldn't want to be making these. If I had an Iroquois player on my team, I would be saying, please don't make these units. Just don't, whatever you do. They feel really underwhelming. They do have a lot of upgrades when it comes to infantry upgrades. They've got plenty, but the unit itself is just so bad. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and then I think we've got a 4th infantry upgrade in the second age. Yeah, so here we've got the Tomahawk. So you can get a whole bunch of like stats on these guys. You can get plus 40% just from cards. That's 40% attack and hit points, but still they feel so underwhelming when you've got them. So it primarily comes down to that attack animation. They are quite good in melee combat, especially if cavalry gets up close, but they do feel bad just primarily because of that animation. And that is part of the reason why our next unit, which we're putting on here, is the Bolus Warrior, and it is in the D tier just because of its animation. So a lot of people were saying that the Bolus Warrior should be included on the list. I didn't want to include it because I knew where it would be sitting and I didn't think it was fair, but we're going to include it anyway. So it's D tier, and again, it just comes down to its animation. Very poor animation. It does have a relatively high rate of fire, but the problem is that it's got the reacquiring problem, where once a target has been killed, it then has to reacquire a new target. And when it does that, it resets its animation. So it has this big problem where, sure, its rate of fire is 1.5, but it's not really, because once the unit is dead, it has to reacquire. All right, so I think that's most of the Musketeers. Other Musketeers that we've got are the Nizam Fusilier. This one's a hard one for me to put in, just because with the Nizam Fusilier, so you can only get this from the church for the Ottomans. So there's a unique church upgrade that you can get called Palace Intrigue. And, oh, excuse me, I just burped there. That was what that weird noise was. And there's a tech in there that replaces all your Janissary shipments with Nizam Fusilier shipments. Now, the Nizam Fusilier is a really, really strong unit. Okay, it's insane, because it's got 4 different stances, and each of those stances does something different. You can counter cavalry at range, like the Carolian. You can counter cavalry in melee, like the Musketeer. But the problem is, you can't get a lot of these bad boys out on the field. You can only get a handful at a time. Like, the most you will ever see is maybe like 20, 25. And it's because of that I don't think it's almost fair to include it on this list. We are including it because it is here, and I think that the fact that you can't train them really limits them as a unit. I think that if you can get them, they're reasonable, but the fact that you can't train them really hurts them. And in saying that, I don't know where to put them. If we're looking at combat abilities exclusively, then yeah, S tier. But when we consider all the things, such as the fact that you can't train them, then I would be maybe even saying A or B tier. But for the moment, we're just looking at combat ability, so we'll just keep it in S. But this is kind of like keeping a mercenary in here, you know? It would be unfair for me to just put a Swiss pikeman in here and be like, yep, there it is, boys. So because of that, I don't think it's fair to do that. So we'll just leave it in A tier for now with the rest of it. So now we move on to the Musketeers. So we've got a whole bunch of Musketeers that are here. Why is an Abus in S tier? Crabgot, I'm not sure how many you've rolled this evening, my friend, but we are doing heavy infantry, which counter cavalry. So we're not including the Grenadier, because it is countering more ranged infantry. Crab says I just came back. that's my man right there. Took a few big rips from the bong. All right, man. You do you. I ain't gonna hate. All right, so now moving on to the musketeers. This one's going to be nice and quick, nice and easy. So musketeers, relatively good anti-cavalry in the early game. Not so hot in the late game for these civilizations, mainly because they've got other units that they make. So the Portuguese or the Spanish Dragoon was recently buffed. It was given an extra, I think it's 15% through the Cav Combat. French Musket is good. It only receives, I think it's 1 upgrade. So if we go check the home city. So they get the team ranged infantry attack, but they don't get the wilderness warfare or the long range infantry hit points card. They're not affected by that. They've got advanced arsenal if they want to take advantage of that, but that's not normally a card that you would include in a French deck. And so typically a French player is going to be going Dragoons instead of Musketeers. And that's why I would be just calling it BT. I think in the early game, they're reasonable, but they quickly lose out their statistics and you just want to stop making them very quickly. The next one are the Russian Musketeers. Now, Russian Musketeers probably a little bit more, I'd probably even say let's just chuck them in B tier, just because they're cheap. They're cheap, but they're not very pop effective. Once it gets into the late game, you really want to be transitioning into sort of Strelets and Cav Archers, Strelets and Cossacks. You want to stop making muskets altogether. Now, there are a few musket upgrade cards that the Russians do get, if we go and take a look, but keep in mind that their base stats are significantly lower. And as a result, so you've got the Strelet upgrade, that's only Strelets, but if we look here, oh, see, Boyars doesn't even affect the Russian muskets. What have we got that affects the Russian muskets then? There's really not much. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to drop those down into C tier. We'll put them just in front of the Iroquois Tomahawk, just because the Russian musket, I mean, I'd rather have these over the Tomahawks. National Redoubt, and that's it. I don't even know National Redoubt. Ransack? Is it an age 4 card potentially? Sevastopol. Age 4 fort. Oh, right, yeah, they can rebuild the forts here, this one. Oh, yeah, so plus 10% HP. So let's take a look where it is, though. It's in age 4. Plus 10% HP, plus 10% all action damages. You know what? If that was like a 50% card, then I'd be like, all right, well, we can talk about the musket being up here. But it's not. It's 10%. So it's really not a lot. All right, so the next one is the Portuguese musket. Portuguese musket is quite good. I would actually be saying Portuguese musket is potentially in front of the Janissary as well. And the reason why is because it synergizes very, 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 very well with the Caçador. So typically you're going to be, as like Portugal, you're going to be going Dragoon and Caçadors, okay? But when it gets to the late game, you can, instead of sending Genitors, you can actually send or just use infantry hit points. So what you've got here, oh sorry, you can actually just use musketeers. So you've got 3 attack or 3 upgrade cards, 15% attack, 15% hit points, and then 30%, also 15% of each of these. And on top of that, you've also got advanced arsenal, which is quite a common inclusion in Portuguese decks. So because of that, you can get like absolutely monstrous musketeers. On top of that, you've also got Royal Guard muskets. And so because of those factors, I think that it's an A tier. It's not quite an S tier. And the reason why is because with the British musketeer definitely fills a void that is left by the longbow. Its upgrades come slightly earlier as well. So with the British muskets get all of their upgrades by the Fortress Age. They get the combat card is in age 3, the health card is in age 2, whereas here the health card is in age 3 and the combat card is in age 4. So as a result, I think that the musketeer sits in A tier. And I think that's all of our musketeers so far. They get an age 2 upgrade plus the church upgrade for HP. Yeah, with the Spanish musketeers, I know that they've got unction, but by the time unction comes around, typically you're going to be using skirm, rod, and lancer. Yeah, I wouldn't be looking at those ones too seriously though. So we'll just keep them in this order. Yeah, minus speed is not good. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we've got all of the ranged units out. So now we move on to the melee units. So I guess the first question is where to start. I guess we go the Rodolero. Rodolero is quite a good unit. I would almost be tempted to put it in S tier, just because of the speed that the Rodolero's got. The Rodolero is a 6-speed unit. It counters cavalry. It has a 40% melee resist. It's very, very, very good in melee. So if you can get up close with your enemy, it's great. Now, keep in mind, it's great for chasing cav, and it serves that purpose. It's really good for following raids, but if it does anything else, it's got quite a low base attack. Now, keep in mind that with the Spanish deck, there are a lot of upgrades as well for the Rodoleros, but they're not typically cards that people include in their deck. So we've got 15%, then we've got the 20% Rodolero hit points, and then we've got down here 15% attack and hit points for the Rodolero. So I'm not going to include them in the S tier. I don't think that's reasonable. I am going to stick them in the A tier, just underneath the Janissary though. I would definitely, if I've got a Spanish player on my team and he wants to make Rodoleros, fine. That's okay by me. I think that's probably one of the best things that Spanish can offer to a team composition. So, and it's because of that they're in A tier. Also, in the A tier, for their speed, is the Inca Plume Spearman. The Inca Plume Spearman has an upgrade from the home city, which enables them to reach a top speed of 5.5 movement speed. So if we go to the Inca home city, we can have a look. So we've got road building, which is 10% speed increase. So they start with 5 movement speed, they go up to 5.5. Now, while their siege has indeed been nerfed, they still serve an incredibly strong role as an anti-cavalry unit. So they're able to chase down. I think on top of this, you can also have the Age 1 upgrade as well, which increases it by a further 5% speed. So you can get 5.75 movement speed. Really, really ridiculous. Absolutely crazy amount of speed that these bad boys get. So they're just total race cars. And as a consequence, I think that A tier is a very reasonable spot for them. They're quite affordable. And when you combine them with Chimu runners together with Plume Spearman, they're unstoppable. It's crazy. You get a mass of like 30 of each of these boys, throw them together. Oh my god, because these guys snare and the Chimus kill. And your opponent is trying to counter them. Like the best that they can do is probably like Musketeers in melee or Halberdiers in melee. That's probably it. And then so, looking down here, trying to spot out what else there would be. Probably the Aztec Puma Spearman. I don't know if I'd be willing to put it like maybe at the end of B tier. Mainly just for the high siege that it's got. So standard musket or standard pikeman's got, I think, 32 siege. If I remember correctly, this has got 38 siege. It did get nerfed quite recently. But it's got a high base movement speed of 5, the same as the other pikeman. And as a result, it's quite strong. Mainly just, it's got a good multiplier against cavalry. A little bit higher than the musketeers, but the same as like as a pikeman. But it also synergizes very well with Aztec early game. So if Aztec gets a lot of coin treasures in the early game, then they're able to make more Puma Spearmen. So it helps with that. Also, you can ship 600 coin infinitely, and then just keep making batches of Puma Spearmen. Once it gets to the mid game, they do fall off. You're going to be typically going Eagle Runner Knights instead of the Puma Spearmen. But yeah, very quick units. And so as a result, I think BT is reasonable considering their siege as well. So now I think we can probably move into the pikemen. So we've got this pikeman here represents every civilization that's got access to the pikemen, but is not this civilization or these two civilizations here. So that means the British pikeman, that means the French pikeman, that means the Portuguese pikeman, that means the German pikeman. That's every pikeman. And the reason why we're doing it like that is because typically those civilizations aren't going to be building the pikemen beyond, say, the first 8 or 9 minutes. After that, so there's no point in me putting all of the pikemen in here because it's just going to clog things up. So we'll leave that for now, but we'll talk more about these two. So we've got the Spanish pikemen as well as the pikemen for the Swedes. I think the pikeman for the Swedes is a very reasonable unit. We'll put him at the end of the A tier. Now, he is a speedy boy. He can get Advanced Arsenal upgrade plus the Church upgrade. He can get a 6 movement speed base, which is as high as the Plumed Spearman and as high as the Rodolero. He also gets a lot of upgrade cards. If we go take a look at the Swedish home city, and we go have a look at all of the upgrades for military, we've got 1 upgrade card, 2 upgrade cards, and 3 upgrade cards. So these are all in age 3. 1, 2, 3. I might just create a deck just to include them all. 1, 2, 3. And then also on top of that, we've got the church card, which provides that speed bonus for it as well. So you can really get race cars. On top of that, we've got... oh my god, Cardloff. Go away with your Germans. You love your Germans so much, don't you? Gosh. Do you main Germany, Cardloff? You must main Germany, right? You're the kind of guy who's like, hey, can I see your home cities? And you've got like Germany that's level 131 and every other civilization is level 1. Every other civ. Don't worry, we'll be talking about that when we get to Doppels, I assure you. But I don't think Germany's really going to be focusing on their pikeman strategy when they've got Doppels around. But yeah, so for the Swedes though, the same thing can sort of be said for them in that you're going to be making Karolians a lot more than you're going to be making pikemen. Okay, but let's say that your opponent is like, let's say it's a 3v3 and your opponent is spamming cuirassiers. How are you going to deal with it? Well, the French player isn't going to be making muskets. He's going to be making dragoons. And you're probably not going to be making pikemen. You're probably going to be making Karolians. Okay, but there are strategies that you can do with super speedy pikemen. I was exploiting one strategy where I'd use this super speedy pikeman and also using leather cannons at the same time. Underrated German pikes. Sure, I made Germany. I knew it, Cardloff. Saw right through you. So that's why I would be keeping them here. I would say that they're above the Pumas and definitely below these two, just because they take a lot of upgrades to come in. Actually, you know what? Because they take so many upgrades, I'm gonna bring them down. I'll pull them down here just because they take so many upgrades to be useful. So they need, at the very minimum, a unique church card. And those typically aren't cards that you would include in your deck. Like, you might include these 3, but you don't include the unique church card. So if you want to get speedy pikes, you're going to have to do it that way. Now, the next pikeman is the Spanish pikeman. So typically used when doing the age 4 strategy. And so you'll be using them with in combination with crossbows. Now, Spanish also get quite good shipments of pikemen. In the age, I think in age 4 you get 20 pikemen plus 24 pikemen. Let's have a look. Yeah, 20 plus 24 pikemen right here. 1, 2. And they also get a lot of upgrades for them, just like the Rodolero. So we've got the 15% for the pikemen here, and another plus 15 together. You've also got advanced arsenal that you can ship from the home city, but typically as a Spanish player, you're not going to be using advanced arsenal. And so as a result, they're not as fast. So these bad boys can get up to 5.5 at Sweden base. And then they can get, actually, because they can get up to 5.5 at a base. I got to stick them below, or like that. Speed is really important when it comes to pikes. But the Spanish pike in particular, you're not going to be too worried about speed because it's more of a hard-hitting strategy, being the Tercio. Now, keeping in mind that both of these pikemen are both individually. So we've got the Tercio, which is a Royal Guard unit. So you can see it right there, Royal Guard. And the Spanish or the Swedish pikeman is also a Royal Guard unit, being the Dalkarl. Is that how you pronounce it? Dalkarl? Bit hard to pronounce. The L next to the K like that. And then, so after that, you'd have just the normal pikeman, which serves as its anti-cavalry role. And to be honest, it's like, I'm almost tempted just to, you know what, we'll just put it down here. Just because you want to think about this, right? Papacio saying 3 cards, the Church, the Arsenal, and Unction for Tercio. Yeah, if you want to go for like a full Tercio strategy, then that's definitely a viable thing, because like you can do, like let's say if you're playing Spain and you want to go crazy, then yeah, you could totally go 1, 2, 3 upgrade cards, go Unction, go the Church upgrade card as well, and then you've got Tercios as well. So you can get some crazy units out, but you got to remember that the base of these units is still only like 14, 15 attack. So it's not very high. Dalkarl. Swedish neglects spaces just like German. Dalkarl. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But then the pikemen, typically you're not going to see this unit after the 9th minute in the game. Okay, you might build these early game to siege torps, to siege shrines, to prevent your pikemen or your crossbows or skirmishers dying from cavalry. But once you get to the fortress age, it's going to be dragoons, baby. It's not going to be these. So even though these guys are the OG, I don't think that they're any higher than this. Definitely much stronger when it comes to anti-cavalry and their role as anti-cavalry than the Russian musket. But yeah, other than that, I would just be keeping them down here. All right, I think now we probably move on to the halberdiers. I'm moving on to the European units first because they're the ones that I'm familiar with. So you guys might be a little bit surprised by this one. It's the halberdier for the Dutch. Yep. Speedy boys as well. Speedy boys. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but in the most recent patch, halberdier for the Dutch was changed. This card, military reforms, okay, was moved to age 1, plus 20% speed. Okay, it was moved to age 1. Now, most people are going to be like, okay, that doesn't mean anything, Drongo. It got moved to age 1. Well, it does mean something, because now we've got synergy with the age up politician, the logistician, because now we can build halberdiers in the second age, and now we can have them super duper fast. And on top of that, Advanced Arsenal is a card that you will include in your Dutch decks all the time. Very important card for Dutch, because it's going to mitigate the religious freedom coffee trade, which gives minus 10% to military land speed. Okay, so you're going to offset that with Advanced Arsenal, but the thing is you can go a strategy where you go Advanced Arsenal and military reforms before you get coffee trade, and you can have 5.2 speed halberdiers, which is incredible, because the halberdier represents a threat to ranged infantry, to heavy infantry, literally to every single unit in the game, except for the rifle rider. And so because of that, I think that halberdiers for the Dutch are positioned in A tier. And to be quite honest, I'm very excited about the halberdiers, so much so that my next race to the top 100 that I do is going to be with the Dutch, and I think it's going to be exclusively with the logistician, because I really want to use these bad boys more. But yeah, so that's where I'll be putting them. Russian halberdiers, probably like slightly above Russian, above like the Russian anti-cav is just terrible. Like cav archers is the best thing, but if you have a front line of halberdiers, you're probably going to need them against like gendarmes. That's the biggest thing I can think of. But yeah, not too strong, quite weak, very similar to the Russian musketeer, just a generally weaker unit overall. Boys, I just realized it's 7:44 AM. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go to work soon. But it's Saturday for me, guys. It's Saturday. Fuck yeah, we can stream all day, baby. Oh, just took another sip. All right. So, and then the next thing would be the Portuguese. Now, the Portuguese halberdier, somebody did say that they've seen the Portuguese halbs used by pros in a pro game. Now, keep in mind that with the Zirius asking, Aussie Drongo, do you have kids? No, I do not have kids. So if we have a look at the Portuguese decks, now typically the Portuguese do include Advanced Arsenal in their decks, but none of these cards affect the halberdier. And as a result, in my opinion, if you're playing as the Portuguese and your opponent's making hand cavalry and you don't want to make dragoons anymore for whatever reason, and there are a lot of reasons. Like let's say you're up against an Inca player. Doesn't France get hubs? They do, but they don't use them. So we didn't include them. So let's say you're up against an Inca player, right? And the Inca player is spamming Chimu Runner and Pikemen, or the Plume Spearmen and Seton Bows. Okay, they're like playing an extended Age 2. Instead of building dragoons and skirmishers and botting like that, because you're just going to get absolutely shredded, what you can do is make muskets instead. Make Portuguese muskets. Because they've got a melee resist, they've got triple upgrade cards, 1, 2, 3. Now, obviously, if you're fighting in Age 3, you're only going to have 2 upgrade cards, but still, they can transition. Whoa!
I got something to report to you.
Papicio coming in with a tier 2. Oh, damn, Papicio, thank you very much. Tier 2, I don't think we get many of those around here. I think you might be the second guy. I think coming in at the tier 2. So thank you very much, Papicio. Very much appreciated. I hope you're enjoying the content. Hey, puppy, says Mr. Junior. Indeed. So that's why I would be saying that the Portuguese halberdier isn't that strong. I would probably be putting it just above the Russian halberdier. While obviously its base stats are higher, its usefulness, in my opinion, is quite low. Whereas the Russian, you know what, I'd probably even be putting it lower than that. When should you make halberdiers? Halberdiers are very useful as a front line. So if you need to protect something, let's say you need to protect cannons, or if you are up against Chimu runners, where Chimu runners just run through everything. So yeah, you know what? I'm even thinking putting it below, just because the Russians do actually rely on that. This is why I don't like the Portuguese halberdier, because it's 4 movement speed as well. So you know what? I'm just gonna fuck it, man. I'm sticking it in D tier. Portuguese halberdier, you stay down there because you're 4 movement speed. You might be 4.4 movement speed eventually, but Advanced Arsenal is a very late game card for the ports. Probably don't even include it on most of their land decks. You do have 8. You've got 8 halberdiers that you can put in, but just that ain't Falco. I think it's missing the French halberdier. Yeah, we're not including the French halberdier. Though we probably should have, considering I think that's the only halb that we're missing here. We're not including the French halb because they're almost never used, French halbs. And they got no upgrade cards for them. People just don't use them at all. You can't send any halberdiers from the home city. I can't remember the last time I saw a French player make a halberdier. They make pikemen, they make dragoons, they make muskets, but they don't make halberdiers. All right, so let's move on to the last European unit, the Doppel. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people. This is a contentious issue. There's going to be a lot of people in the chat saying this should be an S tier. There's going to be a lot of people saying it's too expensive, put it in the D tier. But this unit, I actually beat I Am Grunt with. Port Musket, ask Garja. Upgrades plus synergy with Cassador. Plus Royal Guard. So before we get in and put that bad boy into a spot, okay, I just want you guys to take a look at how many upgrades this guy's got. Okay, we've got the hand infantry attack, hand infantry hit points, hand infantry combat. Okay, so that's 3. Now we've also got Slinger Steel, which reduces their speed and increases their stats. Now, I don't use this card. I don't think it's a reasonable card to use, but they do have the Advanced Arsenal, which increases their speed from 4 to 4.4. And then on top of that, they've got their unique church card, which increases it a further 20%, which takes it up to 5.2. On top of that, if you've got Inca on the map, then you can just get some crazy fast units. So for anybody who doesn't know, so I Am Grunt is like this absolute legend when it comes to Age of Empires 3. He's like an incredibly good player, had like a 95% win rate his entire career. When the War Chiefs came out, okay, let me show you guys. When the War Chiefs came out, TWC, I was playing some 1v1 because I was a really big team game player. I would normally just play with Braden and BioBob. But I was playing some 1v1 and it spawned on this map, California. And I started off in the south and he was in the north. I can't remember what civilization he was playing, but I was playing Germans. And I did only doppels. I like theorized it. I'm like, oh my god, I could theory craft like a mad strat with this. And I actually beat him using doppels. And so because of that, in my opinion, I think doppels are probably A tier. I would say that they'd potentially even be above the Nizam Fusilier. Can we get that? Doesn't want to work? Okay, there we go. And the reason why is because they represent such a big threat. These are such a big threat. If you do not focus down a doppel, you are going to pay for it. You have to pay attention to the doppel. If your opponent ships 5 doppels, okay, there's a 5 doppel card in H3. If your opponent ships these 5 doppels, you must kill the doppels. If you don't kill the doppels, if they get in a hand combat with any of your units, you're toast. You are toast. Now throw into account the fact that you can upgrade doppels as well. Now just keep in mind, doppels typically aren't going to be upgraded. Like this deck isn't a real deck, okay? And this deck here isn't either. But you're not going to be making doppels as a genuine like speedy boy, beastie boy, unless you're going for that strategy. But doppels still represent such a potent threat that you must respect them as anti-cavalry and anti-everything. You have to focus them. If you don't focus them, you're going to be in so much trouble. Doppels in team can be S tier? Yeah, they can. They definitely do get an intimidation stat. I got to agree with you, Papacio. They definitely do get an intimidation stat. They are absolutely intimidating. And it's for that reason why I think that they are in A tier. And now similarly, the Samurai also has very similar functionality as the Doppel. It's got that area of attack. It's got a lot of upgrades. If we go and have a look at the speed, me and for anybody who knows, there's a YouTuber by the name of Major Kill. He's a pretty big YouTuber. We did like some meme strats offline, and I was doing like the German Doppels, and he was like playing Japanese, and he was just going full samurais, and we're just seeing like what the fully upgraded units could do. So if we go look at samurais, military here, so we've got, it increases their speed by 10%, samurai attack 20%. So they've got 2 upgrade cards here. You can also increase the speed from the Golden Pavilion. But other than that, I don't think there's any other real way that you can upgrade them. Obviously the Shogun and the Daimyo behind them can do so as well. But I think that they do represent a threat, but you don't really see the people or German players making them. But at the same time, you don't really see German players making Doppels. I guess you do actually see them making Doppels in Age 2. So that is a good point. But you're never really going to see the Samurai. And I think that's probably because the Ashigaru is so strong. And it's because of that reason, in my opinion. I think Samurai is it 4.4 base movement speed, or is it 4.5? Might even be 5. There's no way it's 5. The 7 Samurai card also buffs the Samurai. Oh, it does too, 5%. Oh, that's cool, and it can be sent twice. That's interesting. They should totally do that more. That's a really cool thing. I never realized that. But yeah, I think like Japan are just so good. Like they've got so many good units. You're not going to be making this. Like you make the Doppels because in early game you need siege. They complement your pikemen quite well if you throw them in. Towards the late game as well, they're very good against hand cavalry. If you mix a couple in, 5 double shipments are really good for siege as well. Whereas like the Samurai, well, okay, I've got a Yumi that's S tier. I've got the Ashigaru that's S tier. I've got the Nagi, which is S tier. I've got the Yabusami, which is pretty much S tier in my opinion. Like dead set. I've been watching so much top gameplay, and when I see Yabusamis out on the field, I just cream, man. I'm so excited for those Yabusami. Oh my god. So it's like, you know, why are you going to be making these guys? The only situation I could ever see you making these... No, I can't even see you making them against gendarmes. Because you've got the Ashigaru that's just going to do it. It's very high cost. That's a good point, yeah. We'll leave it at B tier. I'll call it B tier. Yeah, Yabusami can snipe artillery like a mofo. That's exactly why they're so good. Alright, so let's move on to the next military unit. So I'd probably be saying I don't even know what these guys are called. War clubs? Is that what they're called? War clubs? Bro, I don't play Lakota at all. Club warriors, they're called now. Now, when we consider the club warrior, we also want to consider the fact that he gets a bonus from his war chief. So his war chief's going to be buffing up his movement speed. Movement speed is one of the most important things, in my opinion, for units of a melee nature. So clubs are quite strong. They got high siege. They got higher base damage values than a pikeman does. They've got a little bit of a lower multiplier against cavalry, if I remember correctly. But they're still quite a good unit. I don't think there's any upgrades that they've got for them. Oh, they've got the Windrunner. I don't know how often this is sent though. But typically, as a Lakota player, you're not going to be making these units unless you're opening with a War Hut. After the Fortress Age though, you're not going to be making these units typically. And as a result, I don't think I can award them any higher than B tier. So I think that they are a good unit. It's just that I don't think that they are viable. I think that the club rush exists and it serves a point or a purpose. I think that Seaton club aggression in the early game is a very reasonable strategy to go. It's tough putting them here. I feel like maybe up here. We'll call that. That's about it. But yeah, they've got good siege. They've got high speed, but only when they're around the war chief. So they're good for getting into battle, but not really good for dealing with raids. And as a Lakota player, you're always going to be making bow riders instead. It's just going to be so much easier. B seems generous. Yeah, you're probably right. B does seem a bit generous. Let's go. We'll make it the top of C. Is there a good Nizam build, or are they just for late game? Yeah, there is a good Nizam build. If you check out Riot Coke's Ottoman FI, there's a really good Nizam build there. But they are typically just for late game, yeah. Yeah, War Clubs, like, don't get me wrong, War Club Club Rush is a real threat. Like, if you were to look at, like, you've got 7, 6, 4, and then, like, the 6 Setons as well. So you've got a lot of military units that you can send in the early game. That's like, how many units is that? That's 13. Oh, I'm bad at math. That's 13, 19, 23. 23 units you can send from the home city. That's a lot of units. All right, so next one. Let's probably do the Yabusami. Not Yabusami, the Yamabushi. Yamabushi's a tough one for me because the Yamabushi has a high base movement speed. It also has really good stats, and it also has a great shipment in intervention, and it rounds out the army very well for the Japanese. The Japanese often need a front line when they're doing like Yumi Yabusami together, and this provides that front line for them. So I think that they serve a really important role in being that front line. We see them very often used in games. You might have the archers coming, the shinobis coming out early, and then towards the mid game, like the early fortress stage, you're going to be having these. They also do shadow tech as well, and it's because of that. I think that I'd be putting them above the Swedish pikemen, but below the musketeers. They're quite affordable as well. I think you're able to get out quite a fair bit with export. And as a result, I think that's good. Someone's asking Shadow what? Shadow Tech. It means that when you go up to the next age, you don't have to research anything. You're just able to, the unit will automatically upgrade to the next tier or the next level by itself. It's called Shadow upgrading. All right, so now this is definitely the part of the list I'm less familiar with. I think it's important that we take a join Grant McDonald's harem. Oh, I don't know if I can do that on stream. Oh my god. I can't do that on stream. There's no chance, Gibson. All right, so I guess we can probably go with China then. Probably the easiest. Changdao. Solid C tier. One of the things that comes back to the Changdao, difficult to train because they always come in batches. Now there's a fair bit of upgrades for the Changdao. So we've got the upgrade in age 4. We've also got the upgrade in age 3. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's any other real card that is going to upgrade your Changdaos. Oh, here we go. We've got another 15% on Manchu Combat. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Maybe this one here? Nope. Yeah, so it's really just those 3 cards there. Western Reform for all units, last card. Yeah, this one. So Western Reforms, Manchu Combat, and Territorial Army Combat. So some pretty big upgrades, but they do come in quite late. 2 age 4 and 1 age 3. So the Changdao are in this awkward position. All Chinese infantry does feel quite terrible just because of the way that it trains. When it comes to the shipments, you get a nice shipment in age 3 of, is it 10 or 11? 11 Changdao. So it is nice. But unfortunately, oh, you also, yeah, good point, Gaja. You also get the Brit Consulate. But in my opinion, I would much, but then I guess I'd rather have Changdaos than have halberdiers from the Russians. But then the problem is you can't train Changdaos full stop. Like you can ship them in, you can combine them with your army, Oh, I guess maybe we put them up here. I think that would be it. I would put them like next to a war club. Manchu Combat, yeah, but that's all age 4 stuff. Manchu Combat's age 4. Western Reform's age 4, and then age 3 is Territorial Army Combat. So they do get upgrades, but they're very late. So yeah, I have trouble putting them up any higher than this just because of the way that banner armies work. Banner armies are very difficult to account for. It's one of those things that when you need a certain unit type, you can't just make it. You have to have all the resources for all of the unit types. Where would you put Yumis? Yumis are S tier in their respective tier list. All right, so the next Chinese unit is the Chiang Pikemen. The Chiang Pikemen's actually quite good. It's not amazing, but it has got... we've got, where is it? Old Han Reforms, or Old Dynasty Reforms, which is plus 50%. It doesn't cost anything now, so once it gets to age 4. Now, you're not going to be using that over... you're not going to be using that over your standard Chengdao, but you do use them in age 2, and I think that they're quite strong in age 2. You get the shipment of 9, but I mean, they're not going to be any better than a pikeman, in my opinion. They're going to just be slightly better than a pikeman, because you do have the longevity in the late game to potentially spam them, but I don't, in my opinion, it's not worth spamming them. You're better off just going the standard army. Do you have a link to your different tier lists? Not really, Serangs. You can find them all on YouTube though. So if you just go down underneath the stream at the moment, there should be some banners. So just click on YouTube, and then if you just type in tier list, it will work. You reckon samurai are overrated? Yeah, I would definitely be of the opinion samurais are overrated. I'd be happy to move them down. I'd even say like down here. Yeah, but I'd still prefer a musket over these guys here. And then so next up, I think we might do the Aztec units. So I think we start with the Skull Knight. Now the Skull Knight has got a couple of cool changes in the most recent patch. So I'm glad that we're doing this after the patch. The biggest one is that it got a buff to its movement speed. I think, is that with a card? I'm not sure exactly. But there's this card as well. 6 Skull Knights for 350 food. This is an amazing card. I love this card. Really, really strong. Skull Knights are like doppels. So doppels in that they have an area of effect. And so that makes them very strong. They've also got, I don't think these affect it. It doesn't affect this. But they have an upgrade in age 4. I haven't got it included in my current deck. So we've got this one here, which adds 0.5 speed and also increases the amount of AoE that they do. So a nice little change here. Now, typically, as an Aztec player, you're not going to be relying on these units as anti-cavalry. You're going to be relying on the Eagle Runner Knight, because the Eagle Runner Knight is so damn good. But these offer, in the early Fortress Age, a very good solution to siege. And this card in particular offers a very good solution to... say, I was playing with Aztec, I was playing against an Ottoman player, they shipped Mamelukes. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, well, I can't make Eagle Runner Knights because Mamelukes have 40% range resist. And then I saw this card sitting in my deck just waiting to be shipped. And it was only 350 food, it's not a lot of food. And I shipped it, and I won. And so that's why I think this card in particular is really what makes it insane. Also, Skull Knights, you get the 2 Skull Knights from the Age Up. They've got 72 siege on them. They also shadow tech in the 3rd age, which means that they automatically upgrade. You don't have to upgrade them yourself. So I think that like the aspects of the Skull Knight that are used are incredibly strong. Now you can train Shadow Knights. Why am I calling them Shadow Knights? You can train Skull Knights from the Fire Pit, but typically it's not a reasonable investment in your resources, because you're going to want to be using your Fire Pit for other things, like the XP dance. And you're also going to be wanting to use your Eagle Runner Knights as anti-cavalry. And any kind of sieging that you're going to be doing, probably going to be done either with Pumas or with your, like a combination of Puma and maybe Jaguars, or Puma and the Where are they? Where are those long-range boys? The archers. You know, you guys know the one I'm talking about. Do they not have an upgrade card? I swear they have an upgrade card. Yeah, they do. There they are. Oh my god, I'm blind. Arrow Knights. So these guys here. And Guardia pointing out that Skull Knights are actually standard with the Aztec Fast Industrial. So yeah, I would have loved to have seen like a 10 Skull Knight card for 500 food in age 4. That would be amazing. Because 7 Skull Knights feels underwhelming when you're getting 6 in age 3. This is such a good card. I can't speak enough how great this card is. It's incredibly strong, and because of that, I think that the Skull Knight is quite strong. Especially it represents a threat when your opponent is pushing and you can just pop them out. A Skull Knight's also from the big button. Yeah, good point. It's hard for me where I want to place this though, because I would definitely say it's above here. I would say it's above the Pikeman as well. I would almost go as far to say it's above the Yamabushi. I think like maybe just underneath the muskets is probably the best spot for it. I don't think they do get upgraded from night combat, do they? Eagle Runner, Jaguar... Oh no, they do get upgraded from night combat. Okay, they do. 15%, 15%, 15%. They don't get upgraded from Scorched Earth, though. Okay, that's not bad. They also get the upgrades as well. And they get Attack Dance, if you're going to use it, but you're not typically going to use it. Yeah, the main problem with the Skull Knight is its movement speeds. Exactly, that's really what holds it back. Yeah, so I think I'm happy with it sitting right here in B. The next unit that we'll be looking at is the Jaguar Prowler. So there are a couple of cards that you can send from the home city for the Jaguar Prowler. They're not very often used because it doesn't seem... They're quite underwhelming. And I think that's probably the best word for Jaguar Prowler. I would be saying underwhelming. I would use them to complement my Pumas in anti-cavalry and siege, but I'm not going to be making them. They're also... I think they're 120 food and 30 coin. So they're a very good ratio, but they are quite expensive. I think they're only a 1-pop unit as well. So it's not bad. But when it comes to serving a role as heavy cavalry, or sorry, against heavy cavalry, I don't think they're particularly strong. Obviously, you don't want to be fighting against them if possible, if you've got hand cavalry, but you don't really mind. Now, they do have a role, but their role isn't really within this tier list. Their role is more within... It's very niche. It's killing all of these units here. The Jaguar Prowler has a bonus against heavy infantry. So it's stealth, noble, armed with an obsidian sword, good against cavalry and heavy infantry. So it can also stealth, another important factor. But yeah, it's a very underutilized unit, and I would say probably underused for very good reason. And that's typically because when you get to the Fortress Age, you're not going to want to be spending your food on that. You want to spend your food on villagers and Eagle Runner Knights. So it's tough because it's difficult for me to gauge the power of these units. At first, I'm thinking, okay, it's probably a D tier, but then I'm like, you know what? That's probably not that reasonable. I would rather these guys over a Russian halberdier. Would I rather them over a Changdao? Probably not. Changdao does serve that purpose quite well. But yeah, I think that the Jags, they're probably underutilized, underappreciated, but I can't see them being any higher than this. If I could train Changdaos instead of Jaguar Knights, I probably would. Jags belong next to Skulls? You really think they're that high? They are somewhat like the jack of all trades. I can't imagine them being that high. Like, I could put them up to here, but there's no way you'd put them above the Yamabushi, surely. It's as good as Melee Inf can get. I feel like, yeah, like the Skull Pop especially. Skulls are very niche in my opinion. Do Jags beat Dops? Probably not. I don't know, that's a good question. Oh, probably on cost, yes. On numbers, no. Dops are very expensive and slow. Yeah, but they serve such a threat that you have to respect them. I could probably move Dops down now that I think about it. Maybe like down to here. They are hand infantry. Hand infantry is just going to get kited constantly. Jags slaughter Dops. Jags beat Dops. Okay, there you go. I didn't realize. Isn't Jag base speed 5? Is it really? They have 3 times versus Dops. Oh, I thought it was only 2 times. I didn't realize it was 3 times. I thought it was 2 times. Okay. All right, well then if it's 3 times, that's insane. Yeah, okay. That's actually quite good. Yeah, well, I guess if we're looking at the Jaguar Prowler, it's definitely more of a niche role. It doesn't necessarily serve... You know what, if we were to assess it based on that, because we're looking at what it does, then I would be saying, yeah, it would be quite reasonable. I would even be saying it's probably even better than the Skull Knight, sorry. Why is that? There we go. I would even say it's better than the Skull Knight. We're not comparing these units to each other in the sense of fighting against each other. We're not comparing the Rodolero against the Chiang Pikemen. We're comparing how well they do their job and how suitable they are. How did Bongo's Smurf streak go? Not the best, Harrison. We did end up losing. We played against, who was it? I think we played against somebody in like the top 20. One of the NTDE guys. Very, very good player. He's not here. He's not here. Maybe he's top 50 then. Why can't I see him? I can't remember his name. Oh my god. I thought he was like top 50. Sven. Only rank 115. I thought he was so much higher than that. Okay, wow. Well, yeah, we lost to Sven. Sven played really well. Alright. So let's move on to the next units. So the next one is the Maceman. I'm really not a fan of the Maceman. I don't think the Maceman is at all useful, with the exception of one thing. And that's the Revolution. That's the Incan 2-pack Rebellion that they're allowed to do. So you can do that with an Age 4 card, which turns your Maceman into cannons. So it turns your big boy maces into light cannons, which are the best cannons in the game. And it turns them into cannons 1-for-1. So I think that as a unit, their only purpose is to literally not be that unit. If that makes sense. Like, let's have a look at the cards that they can get. Go to military. You get 3 maces in age 3 or 7 maces in age 4. Like, don't get me wrong, sure, 7 maces in age 4, that sounds nice. But the upgrade, it's only food and coin cost reduction. That's not really that impressive. It's much better to go the 2-pack Rebellion, which is incredibly expensive. It's almost as expensive as an Imperial Age. But it is, you can secure a game with this very easily, just because of how strong Macemen are. So you can see that Macemen do become light cannons, and that's what makes them incredibly strong. But I'm not satisfied that gives me a reason to put them anywhere higher than last on the list. They do have a very cool piece of jewelry that looks like a gold moustache. They almost look like Catman's. Light cannon, best cannon in game. That's disputable. No, that's not disputable, my friend. That is for sure. They're the best cannon in the game. And finally, we can do a tier list on that if you want, Graffiti. And so the last unit is the Rajput. Now the Rajput is the Rajput is a difficult unit because the Rajput is a really good unit, okay, but it's so fucking, sorry, I shouldn't say fucking, it's so expensive. It's a really expensive unit for what it does. Like some of the shipments that India gets for the Rajput aren't actually half bad. If we go and have a look at Indians. So you do get the 5 Rajputs in H2, which are kind of, they're pretty good if someone's pushing your aggro and you can pop these on top of them. They're fast moving, sure, but they're just really expensive for what they do. And it's, yeah, I don't think I I'd probably be putting it like maybe above that or above here. Above like the Haraka, not the Haraka, the Bolus Warrior. 100 food, 30 wood. Yeah, very expensive. The Rajput is the most underused heavy infantry in the game. It's also the most underwhelming heavy infantry in the game. Oh, shots fired, lunatic. All right, well, I think that is the end of the tier list. Now we're going to head into the discussion part. I haven't noticed a lot of dissenting in the chat, so we're just going to start it off with a poll. We're going to see what you guys think. So we're going to do... how is the list? Your responses are great, good, so-so, bad, and turd. So I would appreciate if you voted with your heart and not with the turd, because I know that a lot of people will vote for turd just because of how funny turd is as a word. Turd's the word. Bird is actually the word, but turd is close. So now, if you could vote, you've got 2 minutes to vote, so I encourage you to vote. We've got the live statistics up right now on your screen, so for those of you playing at home on YouTube, you'll be able to see it as well. Probably just put it down here, down at the bottom like that. So we've got, at the moment, about 55% people saying it's good, 29% saying it's great. So definitely not the most controversial tier list that's been done before. That hand cavalry tier list was very controversial, but this one doesn't look at all controversial in comparison. No one going for turd yet. Cardloff saying Port Musk is S tier. Yeah, Port Musket is, I mean, they're very much on the cusp of being S tier. Really, really titled this one least controversial tier list yet. Hey, that's not going to get clicks, Gagoots. I think Doppel and Pikes are too high. Other than that, it's good. Yeah, I could see that. I could understand that. Do you think a pikeman is better than a war club? Rajput's in C tier, says Burrow. Turd until you include Urumi. Hey, Urumi are meant to be in the ranged infantry one. Lunatic says it's great, but I need more time to analyze. Yeah, something like this, like it's a pretty big investment when it comes to time and brain power, really. Urumi is skirm. Yeah, they're not heavy infantry. Harrison says, nah, Port Musk might be B, as you can never really tech into full Port Musk, and they don't have a role in the army. I would even put French Musk above Port Musk. Okay. See, I think they do have a role in the army. I think that they synergize quite well with the Cassador, and they definitely serve as a... You know, a lot of people will say that the Cassador doesn't have high enough hand attack, and the Musketeer sort of serves that role as blocking. So the final poll has come back. We've got 33% voting for, or rather 54% voting for good, 20% for great, 13% for so-so, 7% for bad, and 7% for turd. So thank you guys for all participating. I'm satisfied with this poll, with this tier list. I don't see any big dissent coming out in the chat. Yes, Harrison, that is true, but then what happens when the Chimu runners get on top of you? What do you do then? What do you do when the Chimu runners get on top, mate? "18 ranged Jeanettes go pew pew." You don't even get 18 ranged Jeanettes in land 1v1. In water 1v1, yeah, but not land. It's not worth it. How would you use Halbs, not Musk? Very similarly towards the late game. Thomas Blow, yeah. All right. Well, I hope that you guys have enjoyed the video. I've enjoyed making this one. If you're watching us on YouTube, head over to Twitch, because we're probably still streaming right now. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.